Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
I'll abstain since I left a little early.
So you could give us 3/4 of a vote.
I'm fine with it, but if it's more appropriate to abstain, I will. It seems like there was only one thing I missed anyway.
It was kind of significant. I included in the packet of materials that I emailed to you John's comments, John Almeida's comments about the Town Meeting Act, and I actually have some from Fawn, too, from even before, several weeks ago now. But for tonight, I thought we'd look at the, before we go to the Town Meeting Act, go to the Town Manager Act, which I passed out in your packets here tonight. So as you'll see at the top of the first page, in red, I've noted that this version is with changes that we voted as a committee through March 19. But there were a couple of things that night we voted that I should add. And in going through it, I found a couple of other little things. So if you will bear with me, I'll tell you real quick what they are. There's only one or two of substance. One was to change that date on the first page, the date through which we voted. Next is on page 3, section 3, capitalized appeals in the Zoning Board of Appeals. As I say, it's all mostly minor stuff like that. Section 7, which begins on page 5, I got a little jammed up reading section A. Let me tell you what I thought. This, of course, is the recall provision, the recall election provision. And it talks in section B about, 350 or more registered voters can file an affidavit with the town clerk containing the name of the office to be recalled and a statement of the grounds. So I thought is to change the second sentence a little bit. The second sentence says, "The town clerk shall thereupon provide to the voters copies of printed form petition blanks addressed to the respective board demanding the recall." And I was thinking, wouldn't it make more sense to say that it would be addressed to the respective, that it should be addressed to the person whose recall is being sought and the board to which that person was elected. There's a similar provision in section C on the next page, which talks about how, if they gather sufficient signatures, and it's certified by the registrars, that then the town clerk in section C will submit the petition again to the board. And my thought was, again, shouldn't that say that it would be addressed, that it should be submitted to the person whose recall is being sought and to the board? I'm not sure why it's two steps. In C, it talks about the board notifying the person who's subject to the recall within 72 hours. But I'm not, maybe there's just a reason that I've forgotten.
No, I don't.
Sally,
Go ahead.
my thought is that we don't want this to become something like the town clerk.
Speak right into it.
I'm sorry, yes. We don't want this to become something where the town clerk is like a process server and is chasing down, you could imagine a situation where someone just tries to avoid the town clerk. But by serving on the board, it's kind of like, okay, this is how the notice is going to be provided by the town clerk, as opposed to like service on an individual.
So for you, you see that it makes sense in the first instance for the town clerk to provide a copy of the petition to the board. Is that how everybody feels? And that also then, once the follow-up extra numbers of voters sign the petition, that then the notice goes to the board that the person sits on?
curious about what she means about, this means about, the town clerk shall thereupon provide to the voters copies of printed form petition blanks.
Those are the blank forms, like your nomination papers, that are
Right.
blank, and you have to go have people sign them.
Right, but we're providing to the voters copies of these?
Well, I suppose it's really to the,
Collector of signatures. It's,
well, it's to the people that first have submitted the petition, or
Right.
submitted the affidavit.
right, it's not, it's just something about it saying voters seems confusing.
Yeah, I think it's because in the first sentence, it talks about the 350 registered voters, and it's just, I think it's just following off of that.
Yeah, but it's
But-
not the same thing.
Well, one possibility could be that it could say, "The town clerk shall thereupon provide notice to those voters," or those voters who signed the affidavit, or something.
She'll provide.
It could be just changed to the word petitioners, and that would probably cover
Oh, yeah,
the
yeah,
people
yeah.
who submitted.
Okay? So now we're talking on page 6, section B, we'll change voters in the fourth line to petitioners.
Can I just bring up one other thing in that line that, and maybe I'm just reading it wrong, but when it says, "The town clerk shall thereupon provide to the voters copies of the printed form petition blanks addressed to the respective board demanding the recall,"
And that-
the
and
board
that's-
is not demanding the recall.
Exactly. I think that's where I first started
Okay.
getting kind of hung up.
Yep.
So it should, perhaps it should say, to the board, let's
We
see.
could say subject to the recall or affected by the, I don't, well, then the board's not subject to the recall, but the, I guess.
To the board to which the person was elected. I mean, I'm trying to think of a,
Whose member is being recalled?
Or you could say to the board whose member is subject to the recall petition. It's not the smoothest language, but
to the board whose member is the subject of the recall.
Yeah.
What did you say, whose member what?
Is subject of
Is,
the.
okay.
I'm sorry, did you
Oh,
just,
that's, I just wasn't sure of the wording that was used. Whose member is subject.
is the subject of
Is
the
the-
recall,
okay.
yeah. Okay, so so that kind of addresses the questions I had about section 7B, 7B. I had also suggested in the paragraph that's the second paragraph of B, that in the version from March 9, in the second line there, the word petition was pluralized. And again, I know there's multiple pieces of paper involved, but the petition is a petition. It might be several pages long with several pages of signatures of registered voters, but it just seemed, to me, it's a little confusing if the word petition is in plural there. So I knocked off the letter S. And then I changed town election to annual election, which is the format that you see it in the draft you're looking at today, just to be consistent with what we've been calling it. So that brings me to section C again,
I'm sorry, Sally, where
Yeah.
was that? At the end of,
Yeah,
bottom of page 6, I think.
she changed this to annual election from.
okay, because I see town election on page 7 as well.
Yep.
The second paragraph in section C.
But that could be a special, but if another town election is to occur.
Yeah,
Oh, so it could be distinct from an annual.
it could be. So again, in C, as I mentioned a minute ago, and maybe our discussion has already addressed this, I was concerned about, okay, so town clerk submits the petition to the board, that has the member who's the subject of the recall, and then the board provides a copy to their member. Is that how you feel it should be? Or should it be, as I first started saying, that the town clerk gives a copy to both the person and the board?
I agree with John's reading that it should be the board. Just makes it cleaner and easier.
So instead of respective board, which is the language in C currently, it could say the board,
Like the same as the other.
how do we say, it?
member.
Whose member is the subject of the recall. And I guess that would possibly allow for discussion within that board if they have a 72-hour window to give a copy of it, to give everybody time to talk about it and decide as a board, maybe, how they intend to proceed, and to give the board member who's the subject of the recall a chance to make a determination as to what action he or she wants to take. So it builds in some extra time, which may be very helpful, should there be a recall.
If,
Yep.
if we're proposing that the petition be submitted to the board in question, doesn't that include the subject who's being accused?
One would think. One would think.
Okay.
Yeah, like they would each get a copy, I would think, or
I mean, it
it
would
would
be,
just get emailed to
I
everyone.
don't think it would be appropriate to withhold, to give it to four
Right,
select
four of
board
them.
members.
You
and
might want to make
withhold
sure
it
you
from
talk
the other-
into,
the
unless the person has been absent, possibly. Okay. I may have had a couple more. At the top of page 8, I capitalized the word "act" at the end of section D. In section E, I capitalized "annual" and put in the word "election" instead of "town election." And then I hopped all the way to page 21. To capitalize "town" of town clerk in the last line of section 19, just before, the line before section 20. On the next page, I capitalized "chair," the top line of the page. You can see, this is what happens when I do things on airplanes. Now, the next one could be a typo, but it might have to do with the definition of a word. We had, in section 21, just over halfway down, we had the word "effect," and I thought maybe it should be "affect." So I'm open to any suggestion by you wordsmiths. The sentence reads, "Whenever it shall be necessary to execute any deed conveying land or any other instrument required to affect any vote of the town, the same shall be executed by said town treasurer on behalf of the town."
It should be E.
E.
Yeah,
Be an E, I think.
because you're affecting the vote in terms of like you're making the you're making the vote happen. You're
As
not
a-
affecting the vote by influencing it.
Well, affecting,
Go ahead.
my understanding is to influence is affect.
Right, but I'm saying so
To
it should.
force it to occur is to effect.
Right, which is so that's
And
what I'm
that's what you're saying
Yeah,
that is.
I think that's the intent.
So which one should it be?
It should be E.
So the opposite of what you just said.
I thought, I read that as A. Because
I would say it's like you're affecting the change would be.
Or you're putting it into
affecting
effect.
Any vote, so that would be
Right.
E.
I guess you're putting it into effect. Okay, well,
There were no movies on the plane, right, Sally?
The next, I believe, is on page 26. So nobody can say we weren't like really diligent, right?
That's right. But you weren't.
Section 27, I put in representative before town meeting. Thinking of you, John. And then next is on page 29, section 33. At Mike's suggestion, we have changed what had been a run-on sentence so that the first sentence now ends with the phrase indebtedness of the town, period. I thought it'd be best to start the next sentence by saying, said estimate shall also show the amount necessary to be provided, et cetera, as opposed to saying, before it had said showing specifically. So I was just trying to make the second a complete sentence. Next was section 35. We talked about the Finance Committee and how, the initial act talked about the moderator appointing 9 people, 3 for 3 year, 2 for 2 year, 3 for 2 years, 3 for 2 years, you know what I mean. And, but that's not really the case here, because it's in effect, the committee has been operating, and there are members who have expiring terms and others who don't. So I changed the sentence at this was with your permission, to read that there shall be a finance committee to consist of 9 persons who shall not be town meeting members, to be appointed by the moderator to serve for staggered 3-year terms, period. That's how it's phrased on another board or commission within the act. And then I've said that within 30 days after each annual representative town meeting, 3 members of said committee shall be appointed by the moderator to serve for 3-year terms. If for any reason a vacancy occurs on the finance committee, said vacancy shall be filled by the moderator for the unexpired term. Again, to be consistent with other provisions within the act. And then I crossed out the old language that seemed to be the initial appointment of the finance committee. Then in the last sentence, I capitalized finance committee and town clerk. And then- On page 32, I had just added representative before town meeting towards the bottom couple lines. All these other changes we had voted on. And then finally, section 36 is probably the one of the most substance, which is language that I believe we all discussed, and I wrote it up. It's similar or the same as the language at the end of the town meeting act. So this section 36 would now say, this act shall be reviewed by the town of Danvers at least once in every 20 years or sooner, as requested by majority vote of the town meeting members at an annual or special representative town meeting. Any such review of this act shall be conducted in the manner as determined by a vote of the town meeting members. So I've kind of talked through the dozen or so changes, 2 of which are a little bit substantial, 1 of which is a spelling of a word. And we could either go back through them point by point or vote on them all as one piece as you see fit. I defer to all of you.
Seems fine to vote on all of them at once. I move we accept the Town Manager Act with revisions made by Sally since our last meeting.
I second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, Sally, for your
Yeah, that was great.
work.
Okay, so I do have a draft report for your consideration tonight. And it might be too soon, since I just, again, sent it out yesterday. It's double-spaced, I thought, to make it easier to read. So I began with kind of a preamble talking about how we came to be and who we are and the meetings that we had and input, et cetera. And then I thought it makes sense to divide the report into first a section on Town Meeting Act and then next Town Manager. In the Town Meeting Act, we spent a lot of time talking about how best to encourage and support more active participation. And so I tried to highlight the substantive changes that we've made, but also the various ideas we've had about how to encourage that activism, if you will, by the town meeting members. Is anybody ready to talk about this tonight, or would you rather digest it and talk about it at our next meeting? Or we could begin tonight and wrap it up next
let's do
time.
it.
Because hopefully by the next time, I'll have the Town Manager Act section to add. Any thoughts?
I had one thought on, let's see, I guess it's the third paragraph after you've listed all the members, where it's talking about attached to this report or our recommendations. I just think that if people are unfamiliar with Board of Selectmen and Select Board actually just being different nomenclatures for the same body, they might be a little bit alarmed that we are changing or proposing a change to the way the town is managed, so to speak. I just thought perhaps putting quotation marks around Board of Selectmen to Select Board, or adding or changing some sort of language that we're only suggesting a nomenclature change might further clarify it. But I'm not sure if everyone feels that's needed.
Yeah, I think that we could just put maybe the town's name change from a Board of Selectmen to a Select Board, just in that one.
Does anyone know the year that happened? Maybe if we put the year that it happened, it might make it clear
Yeah,
that it was a thing that's already transpired.
The town's change from Board of Select Board, the town's name change, Select Board in 20.
Yeah, the town's like 20, whatever.
Right. 20. Yeah, the town's 2019 or something.
I can try to find that out.
I would say that, part of our charge with this committee was to review and modernize, if you will, the acts. And I think just by changing the name of the board to what it's recognized to be today is part of that process. I'm not sure we have to explain it.
Well, I can understand, but for somebody that's not familiar with the town and how it's run, it can feel sometimes like there's all this nomenclature that you're just not familiar with, or code words that people use as if everybody knows them, and it's not always true. And I think it really makes a lot of sense to aim for the people who don't know. They may think that we're changing that name, as opposed to it having already been changed, and we're just matching
Yep.
the act to what the nomenclature is now. So if we can put in the year it was changed and put in quotes, I think that goes a long way. Because hopefully we'll have lots of new people who want to come and step in, and we'll read this report, and they'll have a clearer idea, I think, if we do that. Yes, John?
In this same paragraph, I was thinking we might, and I don't know, I don't want to get bogged down with too much minutia, but I think that there might be more that we can say here as far as some of a lot of the red lines that people will see are cleaning up confusion or our choice of terms like representative town meeting, stuff like that. Maybe, laying that out here so when people look at it, they don't get overwhelmed by the red lines.
So I like that as well, because I was having a similar thought, because one thing I liked was where you sort of had that section of the substantive changes, which I think was good, so I think even just a line like, as you will see in the red line versions, most of the changes are X, Y, and Z, the more substantive changes are outlined in the pages ahead or something, because I agree with you, like if at a first glance you just see a lot of red, and it might be overwhelming for people some people won't want to read all of it, but if they can know that many of those things are just, they can look at the substantive changes and say, okay, I know in section 7, I'm going to go check out this change. So I agree with you, maybe adding just one line or something about that in the beginning would be helpful.
So what phrase did you use, John? You said,
Clearing up some confusing language from the historic, from the earlier version of the statute, and then something to the effect of changing some terms to reflect our understanding of, representative town meeting. What were some of the other ones? Annual, like the town election. Remember, because the town election was very confusing.
Yes, between annual or special, or,
It was like another term for,
it was just,
maybe that was the caucus piece where there was,
oh, that's what I did want to say.
there was confusion about the term election in different places.
Could we not just expand on your sentence that's already there, that says most of our proposed changes reflect the change from Board of Selectmen, as well as expanding pronouns, and then change in capitalization? Like, could we not just,
Yeah, just like continue the list.
just continue the list of that sentence?
And
But yes, there was another, I can't remember.
would the cover, one of those changes, would the cover grammatical changes, cover all those little capitalizations and words? That would be a word that most people, I think, could relate to. So grammatical changes would be maybe a
good way to catch
cover
it.
all.
Yeah, I was going to say grammatical and stylistic or something like that.
I'm sorry, no, what did
I
you
was
say?
saying you could say something like grammatical and stylistic changes, because some of them are style, some are grammar, some are clarification, if I had more words. But I do like the idea of grammatical, because that gets at it pretty simply.
And we do have a sentence at the end of this paragraph, unfortunately, it goes over into the next page, saying that in this report, we're summarizing the substantive changes.
Right.
But I think all that's very helpful. I can rework that paragraph. Okay. And then I felt when I got to the Town Meeting Act section that it was helpful as a prelude to say what our biggest concerns were, because then it kind of explains changes that we're proposing. At least that's what I hope.
Yeah, I was just going to say not a change. I appreciated that. I felt that this sort of reflected what we discussed about sort of making the case for why we voted for these changes, and you sort of builds to the changes. And then I just want to say I like the line in Section A about the town meeting members that in an effort to increase engagement and aim for more competitive and complete elections. I just thought that was a really good summation of what we discussed, yeah, and why. So I just wanted to
With
commend you
regard
for
to
that.
that sentence that he just read, I would suggest, or toss out to consider, that At the very end of that page,
Can you tell me where you are?
where, the very last line, where it says, "The committee voted to reduce,"
Okay,
I would suggest that we change that to, "The committee voted to recommend a reduction to the size of town meeting."
Yeah. That's a good point.
We can't decide on our own to change it, we're proposing to change it.
that's a good point.
And similarly, in section B, would be the same argument, at the last sentence, "The committee voted to recommend that all candidates be required to pull nomination papers."
I feel like if we do this, so then we have to say that for everything, like it says that in C, the committee voted to insert language, and so then, again, would we have to say, we recommend to insert language?
Yeah, I think we probably do.
I was trying to make a difference, and I could use your input in how to do this. There are certain things we're recommending, like the forum that John spoke about so much, the precinct forum. So those are recommendations, but they're not things we voted to include in terms of amending the act. You see, that's what I was trying to draw a distinction.
One way we might address Mike's concern is at the beginning, when we talk about a summary of the substantive changes, maybe that's where we say recommended.
Yeah.
And then not have to worry about it in each subparagraph.
I think that could work. I will say, I thought C and D are a little bit different just because, at least C is different, because A and B are talking about actions, whereas C is talking about recommended language insertion, so they are a little bit different. Because we did vote to insert the language, we didn't recommend to insert the language, so, but I do agree with John that it's probably cleaner to just put it at the top and not have to worry about it.
I just want to make sure it's a clear line between the votes we took, because that's, to me, a real important part of what we'll be doing, is saying, this is what our
We
committee of
believe in.
10, this is what we voted, as opposed to, we talked about this, that, and the other thing, but didn't feel it was appropriate to suggest a change in the act. But these are things we recommend will make town meeting work better and make the town function better. So that's where I was struggling with what verb to use.
I think the firmness of what we've done is important. I mean, we as a committee have decided that this is what we think, the direction we think the town should move in. So there is obviously going to have to be a decision by other people to whether they would accept our decision. So I think the firmness of what we've done is important. You know, if there's areas that we're suggesting, that's fine, but if I look at the body of our work, I think it's definitive.
Maybe one way to do it, just following up on an idea that was just expressed, is to say the committee voted on the following changes to the act or something.
Yeah, maybe reference the town meeting act.
Voted on the following changes, and then say, in discussion, we also recommend the following. Okay. So it's kind of interesting because once I started flipping through our red line version of the Town Meeting Act, it came out pretty clear what were the substantive things as opposed to just capitalizing words and, select board instead of board of selectmen. It was obvious there were really just a handful of substantive changes. So it's just, I was able to get them into A, B, C, and D. If you feel there's anything I've missed, of course, let me know. We'll add that. And and John does have suggestion for changes. Would this be a good time, John, to talk about those while we're at this part of the report, or should we go on with the report and then come back?
Yeah, I think we should continue with the report.
Okay, because there's not a whole lot more after that. The various recommendations. One thing, John Jaworski, you had said that it would make sense to have it be an annual event, the precinct forum, have it be an annual event, and we kind of tossed around ideas and dates. So I was looking, pull out a calendar, just started digging through, thinking about the dates that nomination papers have to be drawn, which is February, I think. That's when they're available to be drawn. The town election early in May, town meeting the third week of May. So I was trying to think, okay, well, when in that kind of time frame could there be an annual date? And somebody, I'm sure I didn't come up with this idea myself, mentioned the possibility of Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So I looked it up to confirm that Martin Luther King Jr. Day is the third Monday in January each year. And it is a year that's identified with doing community service, public service. And then I was like, well, President's Day is the third Monday in February, so we've got third Monday in January or third Monday in February to talk about. And again, you would think that President's Day is there's something logical in doing kind of your civic duty on the day we celebrate our presidents, right? So in my hokey kind of mind, that's where I came up with those as two possibilities. So what do you think about this series of little recommendations? I shouldn't say little, these recommendations.
My thought on that was, well, you're going to have to pay people to work on a holiday at the high school, so that might be I was thinking if we said around those times as opposed to specifically picking those dates. Because that's the time of year that we're talking about, and that's where I was coming at it, was like, yeah, roughly that time of year.
But there is also a lot going on at the high school for MLK Day anyway, right? So, I mean, people would already maybe be coming here.
Coming here, you mean coming to the high school?
Coming to the high school to be part of the festivities, right? So, and if not, then maybe it would get people to come, and they can kill two birds with one stone.
We don't want to encourage killing birds.
Okay.
My only thought for President's Day.
So to speak, not actually kill the bird, but.
My only thought with President's Day, I love the sentiment, but I think that's usually school vacation week, so probably not good. But I like the MLK Day idea. It's a day a lot of people have off. I guess it would be a question of what's required staffing-wise to have the school open, because I do think that's a valuable concern. But I do like the idea of it being, I think having something that's regular and known is valuable, and that way it doesn't have to be scheduled every year. It's just every year it's on the third Monday in January. I do think that's valuable.
So we could say on or about MLK Day and cross out the President's Day idea.
I think that having a day itself is important, because, as we all do, when we have an important day, we write it somewhere, wherever. So I think there's some value. I think by saying around, you kind of leave it up to who's going to decide when that is, who can make it. Now we say this is the time, and if this is important to you, which is really the reason we've talked about doing this, then you will make it so that you can be there on that day, and it will be in your calendar.
The thing that I'm struggling with about this is, how do we recommend a structure where the precinct members are not just showing up and their town meeting members are not there? I mean, we can't require it. I mean, I think about my job. Sometimes I work MLK, I cycle through that every few years. I might not physically be able to be there at that time, but yet if we don't somehow mandate that town meeting members are there, I don't know how that this will work. So that's what I'm just stuck on, and I don't know how to fix that.
If I recall, we kind of talked about that, and we were concerned about that particular issue, but we also had the other side of, do we want to mandate that this must happen? And I think if, at least the communication to the elected precinct members, that I guess I would love to see it, quote, a requirement, but on the other hand, if all the people in the precinct are notified, then it's on their responsibility to be there. And if all of a sudden no precinct representative shows up and 20 members of the precinct show up, that's good and bad. All right, but it sends a message.
Right, it'll
And
speak
I
loud and
think
clear.
if that happens, so be it.
Then they can not vote for those, I mean, the requirement is they could be voted out. Like, to me, that's the mechanism, is if you don't show up and you get a bunch of angry precinct members, they decide next election they're not going to vote for you. I mean, I guess that's because I agree, I mean, you can't require people to be there, but you can have consequences, I guess.
And the key, if I'm just finished, is the communication. You know, how is all this communicated to each of the elected precinct members and then to the general public, so that everybody is aware and then they make their decision from there.
Just to be sensitive, is this something that's okay that we just choose to do it on a day that already has events? Like,
I don't know. I mean,
Can it be at the end of the events or the beginning of the events?
Yeah,
not
I'm
talking
just-
about during.
Right,
the,
right.
You know, during.
Yeah.
But.
Oh, yeah, so after.
While the school is open and while people are coming here, it just seems to me like you're going to have the audience already coming,
Right.
and everybody
Yeah, if
after
it's
the
after,
festivities
yes.
or before may pop in and to their own respective precinct rooms and.
I mean, if we're concerned about the aspect of doing it on a holiday, but we want to have some regularity, couldn't we say it's the second Monday in January, or I mean, we could pick any Monday we wanted to. It doesn't have to, I mean, I understood your intent behind the holidays, but if we are concerned about other events, or the schools being closed, or people not having the day off, we could just say it'll be the fourth Monday of January, or whatever it might be. We could pick a different day.
But then they'd have to hire people to be here. So this was a way to get around that.
That's true.
So
What
there
I
would be
could
no
do-
pushback.
If I may just add to that point, if I may, Sal, my thought of putting the holidays was not so much that it would be on the holiday, but it would be close to that holiday. So again, mentally, those of us who have been elected would say, it's going to happen this particular Tuesday after Martin Luther, the Wednesday after Martin Luther King Day, because that holiday is the thing that kind of accents that time, rather than being the exact day. But if there's an exact day, I think that may work, as long as it's in the evening.
Could we also just do it maybe in the library?
But they're
Instead
not
of,
separate rooms. That was one of the reasons we thought the
well,
high
there's,
school.
I mean, there are separate rooms,
Are there
right?
eight?
Not
Are there
enough.
There's not
No.
eight?
One possibility here, I mean, I could look up what happened this last year at the high school on that day, so we can see if it's going to actually pose a conflict. Again, the big point here is to get the idea that we think as a committee, it's something that should happen. I was talking to somebody since our last meeting, and I don't think it was a child, who said to me that in all the years that she's been involved with town meeting stuff, she'd never thought about it as representing the people in your precinct. She thought you're the town meeting member from that precinct, but not thinking of it as in the representative role that we've really glommed on here. We've made sure to refer to it always as a representative town meeting. And in fact, the act, which went from open town meeting to representative town meeting, I think kind of assumed that, but I think we've gotten away from it. And I include myself in that category. I haven't thought in the past of reaching out to the people who live in my precinct to ask what they thought about subjects that I thought were going to be coming up, or solicited input for ideas. And I think it's going to be, or it is, a big change in how we look at the role of town meeting members. So for me, just for discussion purposes, I'd love to have something like this in our report. Some of the details, well, they can be worked on. But,
I do agree with the details being worked on. I do think that making this as fully baked as possible, though, makes it harder to say no to it. That's just my opinion, that even if it's not, even including the recommendation of a date or something, I think just makes it harder to dismiss that idea, because it's more fully thought, there's some structure around it. That's just my thought. So I know this seems like minutia, but I do think it's valuable to figure out how we're going to present this as a fully formed idea, because I think it's important.
As far as, Sally, when you were looking at the different other events that are happening within the town, one of the issues would be if our constituents were to attend this meeting and they had certain thoughts about whatever, is there enough time for that to have an impact on what may happen in May? Because that would be the purpose of it. It wouldn't just be the fact that I come to my precinct forum and I, share ideas, et cetera, but it would be important that I, as an elected town meeting member, I now can go to a committee, I could go to select board to share what I heard within my precinct. Is that January time, give that opportunity?
I think so.
Okay, good. I don't have a sense of all the pieces, but if you think so, then that's great. Yeah, so that's January, February time, you think will allow that to happen?
It'll be before budget season.
Well, the budget starts in the fall, right?
Well,
department-
preliminary,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, the department level does, but doesn't get, for instance, to the finance committee generally until now, so.
And I don't know that a town meeting member would have a lot of impact on budget anyway. I think this is
Although-
more like,
But isn't that really the only power we have?
No.
no.
Just
No,
as-
I mean,
It
for,
would be like facilitating, like I just got a request from one of my precinct people to support them in a crosswalk island type thing. So it's more, supporting for all kinds of things, right?
Or
Right, but-
if a person came in and was really upset about a pothole, or a streetlight that's out, you can go online to the DPW site to report those things, and people might not know that.
Right.
So part of it would be sharing helpful information.
Helping, yeah.
right,
Or-
but that,
Or somebody once asked me about their solar panels. I'm sorry, now I've interrupted you
no,
twice in a
no.
row. Their solar panels and how that interacts with the electric. And just to have somebody else who can maybe get you the information about what you do about that problem.
I just meant for timing reasons, that the only thing that we're talking about timing for January, February is for the town meeting, which is generally just budget stuff. Otherwise, when we meet with constituents, it doesn't matter what time of year. So if we're worried about just anything, then it doesn't have to be in January or February. If we're worried about like them talking about budget things, then it matters when we do it.
That being said, I noticed that there are open forums for budget and warrant articles that are coming up. I'm not familiar with, would there be an opportunity to go to those, for example?
There's one tonight, actually.
Yeah, right, yeah, right, I saw the dates. So that would be a time when, if I, as a representative of my precinct, could go to one of those meetings because it was something a little more substantive about what they're dealing with, as far as budget or warrant articles. Okay. So that's, if it was in January, February, they'd still be able to do that.
Right.
Okay, great.
Did you have something, Mike?
No.
I think the January, February timeframe is still important because that's when people are making decisions about, do I pull nomination papers, do I move forward? So it's like, it's in the air already, and I think we lose that opportunity if we move, if such a meeting were to take place, such a forum were to take place, I think we would lose a lot of that if it's a different time of year.
I like January.
Well, maybe we could say something that's specific enough that it's as close to fully baked as possible. This would be held on a specific date in January. And then they can't look at that and say, well, they said MLK, that's not going to be workable. We're going to throw that out. But it specifies that we think that that's the month where it should happen.
Okay. What about some of the other ideas? I noticed that, you know, we were saying that when a resident submits nomination papers, they should get information to take back with them about responsibilities and expectations, et cetera. But in fact, there is already something, the town meeting guide, but it's from November 2002. So I snuck that one in here. We had not discussed that. That's completely self-drawn by me. But it's dated November 2002, and I think it should be updated. And again, thinking about people who haven't engaged a lot in the governance of the town or aren't real familiar with playing with the town's website, that guide should, I think, include how you can find out when different boards and committees are meeting. Not just enough to say, oh, just go to a meeting. Well, how do you find out? And they should know, I mean, people should know the answer is go to the town website and you can look it up. But to tell people that's where they can go to get that information. Or to find out, you know, I was on the finance committee, and a lot of people don't know what the finance committee does. And it's one of its biggest functions is the review of that budget and hearings about it. The select board also reviews the budget and has hearings about it. Before that, the budget is being generated by the management team of the town. So the place that there's input by citizens is both the select board and the finance committee. But again, somebody who just happens to live in town, just moved in, or whatever, they don't know where to begin in the search for information. And I think that's part of what we've heard, what I've heard certainly, people don't know how do things work, how do things operate. And I think we can work to make that less of a question and make it easier for residents to get the information they need. So that's why I tossed that in there.
I like it.
Plus, it's interesting, in that meeting guide, I think, is where I found language that mystified us earlier, that referred to the town election, the annual town election, as being part of town meeting, that happens, and then town meeting maybe is suspended, I forget what the words were, and then town meeting itself happens almost 3 weeks later. But it was interesting, because that's how the act was written.
Yeah.
That the election happens at town meeting or as part of town meeting. And we've now said, first there's town election and then there's town meeting. So, but it makes sense, because again, when it was open town meeting, that's probably when they did elect the select board or the tree warden or whoever else had to be elected. But now it's really a separate proceeding. Anyway.
Silly.
Go ahead, Jen.
If I could go back to the earlier, the recommendations for the Town Meeting Act. A couple of the lettered sections, A, B, C, D. A couple of the sections have sort of like what our logic was for why we made the choices we made, and a couple of them don't really have that. And I was just wondering if this is described as a summary, are you intending for these bullets just to be like the cursory and then we're going to expand later, or do you want to have all of it in this section?
Well, I'm open to suggestion. I want very much, you know, we had talked before about how important it would be for our report to show that we talked about a lot of issues and talked about them at great depth. Like just the recall election provision, we spent over 3 meetings on that. So I'd like to be able to communicate that, and places where I thought I could put in why, you know, the rationale behind our vote, I tried to, but I think that probably needs to be beefed up or maybe separated from the bullet points. You know, when you look at the report, I think is going to be really long, and I'm concerned if it's too long, people won't read it. Sometimes there's an executive summary that just has bullet points. It's almost like, for me anyway, the process, I've got to kind of write it out first and then go back and make bullet points, I guess. But I'm open to suggestion, please, if you see things that would describe more what we grappled with to come to the conclusion we came to, and where you think that should be, let me know.
Sally, could you kind of give me, maybe myself only, how would this presentation take place? In other words, are you talking just before the select board, before the finance board? Give us a sense of where this is all going to go and how it would be delivered, so.
Yep, I thought a lot about that, even who it should, I was going to originally have a to and from, like on a memo, and I couldn't decide who we write this report to. So as you'll see, I begin it as a report to the town of Danvers. How about that as a way of just avoiding the issue? But my thought is that, the vote that formed our committee, let me get to that, because I've made multiple copies of it for tonight. The vote was to have the committee formed to review the two acts and to prepare a written report of its findings and conclusions. Recommended revisions to the acts, if any, shall be placed on a warrant article or articles for the 2025 annual town meeting. Now, I've been informed and assured that if we're not done on time to get to annual town meeting, not to worry. And also, because of other things that'll be going on for annual town meeting, I've also been informed that most likely our work would not be taken up until special town meeting, out of fairness to the town meeting members, but also because there'll be all the budget and all the other stuff at the annual town meeting. But that process of getting on a warrant, to be placed on a warrant article, to me, begins then with the select board, who generates the warrant articles for the most part, though citizens can as well. And then once the select board prepares a warrant article, it then goes to the finance committee for hearing. So my thought is that we will submit this report to the select board after our second meeting in May, so that they can have it. They probably won't be able to do a lot with it until after the elections and after they form the new board. So we'll get it in, but it might be a couple weeks before they actually deal with it. But that's my thought. This report would go to the select board with a request that they form a warrant article, and then from there to the finance committee, and that we would use this report in both those settings and use it once we get to town meeting as well. We may have to modify it a bit depending on what the select board and finance committee do with it, but that we would then kind of tweak the report to make it for all town meeting members. And as Dan mentioned that he did with the Historical Society matter, we most recently heard that we would send that to all town meeting members in advance. That's what I would like to do.
So that initial presentation to the select board, they would be looking at paper, and you'd be there to answer any questions? Is that what it would look like?
Yeah, I would suggest that as many of us as can be there could. And we would be submitting the report plus the 2 red line acts.
Okay. Thank you.
That's what I envision. I'm open to suggestion. Just because that's what I envision doesn't mean that's what we should all do.
I don't have a specific suggestion on that. I did just want to quickly, before the thought passes, sort of what John was saying about the A, B, C, D sections. I do think it's probably worth in section B adding a line about a justification. I'm just thinking that anytime we're doing something where we're essentially, I don't want to say barrier, but we're essentially making it more difficult to run for re-election, we're adding an additional step. I think that should be justified for why we're doing that. So even if it's a line, might be good to add a justification in there.
What would you add?
I think it's probably can be similar to what we wrote in section A about to ensure more competitive and complete, to ensure more engaged candidates and competitive and complete elections. Because I think what this is really getting at is we want candidates who truly want to jump off what you're talking about, to represent their precincts. So just, creating a pool of more engaged candidates, I guess I would say. I don't know if other folks, I don't want to speak for the group, but that's how I interpreted it.
Do you think during our presentation, after, I assume the select board will get our report ahead of time, and then they would determine whether or not this would be a presentation by us at a select board meeting or an open public meeting? Would that be?
Well, I'm sorry, just jotting a note that the end of our report should ask the select board to prepare a warrant article, to submit our findings to the town meeting.
But before they even do that, I assume, once they get our report, they will then, in a few weeks, select a date for one of their select board meetings that we do a presentation. And then they would do the warrant article after that?
I don't know. We could include a request that we would like to appear before them to discuss.
We do. We don't have to.
Oh, no,
least
I think
offer
you
to
have
answer
to.
questions.
So, yeah, no, yeah.
Here, we're done.
Yeah.
So I'm not clear, we would meet with them, or one of us would meet with them before that time? No.
I would think that they would just receive the report, and then they would set up like this,
Put
the
us on the
select board
agenda.
meeting, yeah, exactly, put us on the agenda for a presentation.
Yeah, good, yeah.
What I don't know, it hadn't occurred to me, is whether, if we'll submit the report just by emailing it to them, or actually attending a meeting at which time we present it to them. I don't know the answer to that. I'll have to ask around. I'll have to ask.
Yeah. I would personally just think emailing, because they're going to want time to read it anyway, so I guess we could show up at a meeting and present it, but I don't know that it's, until we're on the agenda, I don't know if it's necessary.
Certainly wouldn't think that any of us needed to be there to answer questions until they've had at least a couple weeks to look at it, analyze it, maybe even form questions that they send to us so that we can
Right.
be prepared to answer them in a substantive way.
Yeah, all these things I don't know the answers.
I'm more than happy to just deliver them at a meeting. Here you go, everybody.
On the last page of the draft so far, I tried to summarize, tried to discuss or point out the fact that the committee discussed several issues at length, and that's where I started putting things in, but this might be where we could add a lot more. Remember, we spent a lot of time about whether we should change the dates of the annual town election or the annual town meeting. But the more we talked about it and the more information we got, like the town clerk was talking about the cycle, the election cycle, it just didn't really make sense to change it. We talked about increasing the number of signatures on nomination papers for town meeting members, but it seemed that would possibly create a higher barrier. We talked about term limits, but rejected that idea. I'm sure there are others. What I tried to do, the process I went through first is going through all the minutes of all of our meetings, and then going through the red line versions of the act. I'm sure in that process there's stuff that I missed, that if I go back to my handwritten notes, I might find more things that I intended to raise. But this is as far as I got.
Well, I do see in the first part of the Town Manager Act that you wrote that we did spend a significant time during the earliest meetings discussing, so that could probably just be in that section above.
Well, except that language applies to the Town Manager Act, not to the Town Meeting Act. I mean, it does a little bit.
It does a little bit. Because we talked about, do we even do a town meeting?
I guess I hesitate to include that at all, simply because you especially, and we spent many meetings on it. However, it was then quickly made clear to us that that's not what was part of our job, and I think that therefore, I think it may be more confusing than anything to include it in the summary. I think it certainly exemplifies how in-depth we tried to be with this process and how hard we tried to work on it, but it's not actually part of any of our recommendations as the work of this commission, as we were then told.
And that would be the first part of this document? Oh, the ending, okay.
It might be good in that, I think
Missing that.
some members of the public have raised the question, why not change to a city form of government? And we did discuss it. So I think it's worth saying that, including as it would be, kind of the end, like these things that we talked about but didn't really make recommendations on. I think it is worth including for that reason, that, that specific piece.
Back when we were discussing it, again, this is based on my notes, it doesn't, but what we talked about at one point several months ago may not be what we feel now, but people felt it was important to let the town know that we really grappled with those issues and put them aside deliberately, feeling that that was a bigger task than the task we were given. That would require a different level, different timeline of consideration.
And I lean towards including it as well from a transparency perspective and reflecting the work, but I think other citizens of the town maybe also had misunderstandings about, because I definitely had people come up to me and were like, wait, what's the charter committee doing? And they weren't really sure what the purpose was, so I do think maybe just sort of being upfront and saying this was, we did have these discussions, but that wasn't the purpose of the committee. I think just from a perspective of transparency, because we did spend several meetings on it. I wouldn't want it ignored. And I do like the line about, if this is something that is worth considering, and it would need to be a separate committee that town meeting would need to vote on, so there is that sort of action of.
You could, if you want to. You could
Exactly.
still look at that, yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts on, again, it's just a draft, and I've got more work to do. I'll take your comments tonight into consideration.
With the things that were, that we rejected or didn't adopt, I might be misremembering, but there might have been some cursory discussion when we were talking about the recall provisions as to whether we should include town meeting members in that. And I believe we quickly concluded that it wouldn't be necessary or appropriate. So maybe that's something, like another bullet on the things that we thought about but didn't recommend? Or am I misremembering? Does no one else remember that?
Yeah, I don't really remember that.
Yeah. It
But-
might have just
but
been
we've
like
had a
really
lot.
quick.
Yeah, we've had a lot. We've said a lot, so, yeah.
Because I think it was written as for townwide position,
Yeah.
townwide positions. I think we may have had that question, then said, well, it was written for town, I don't know, but I
just
don't,
like-
yeah,
Oh, right, okay, now I remember,
I
okay.
think, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I remember.
With this section listing the things that we didn't adopt, I think I'm leaning towards Fawn's suggestion, just because there were so many things that came up once or a few times that we are not suggesting that which ones would we put there, which ones wouldn't we? And I also think that our report, we should really focus on defending what we are recommending. I don't really think we need to defend what we're not recommending. So I think I'm actually winning over to Fawn's side on that one. I mean, if in front of the select board at any of these hearings, a citizen raised their hand and asked, we would be able to answer that question, but I'm not sure it needs to be in the report. So I think I'd lean that way.
I have a similar but a different viewpoint on that. I always keep going back to what the Warren article was. And the Warren article did not deal with that. And if I'm not mistaken, if the representative town meeting decides they want to revisit that, then they can do that at any point, because within 20 years or sooner, they can go and put another committee together to investigate whatever, the Town Manager Act or the Town Meeting Act. So I don't see it necessary to include this last section in our report.
I have one other idea. Anybody who attended or watched our first probably 3 meetings, maybe 4, will probably think, well, wait a minute, they were talking about city form of government and city council and mayor, they were talking about that stuff, what happened to that? And I think there is some expectation, not everywhere in town, but some parts, that that's what our job was. So I think as a form of government, maybe not to everything that we discussed and didn't take action on, but for that, it was such a big issue those first couple of meetings. I guess, in that, it came back to me as I was going through minutes and notes, that there, I'm trying to anticipate what could be expected and to say we're not just ignoring that. We talked about it. It's outside the scope of our mandate. And if you want to do that, there is a way to do it, but it wasn't for us. Something like that, just to reassure people that we're not just like ignoring that big issue that was our first couple meetings.
I would agree with the first two sentences. We addressed it, and we decided that it was not in our jurisdiction to talk about it. End of story. That's it.
I have a thought, which is that maybe it would fit nicely earlier in what I'm just going to call the preamble. Maybe in the paragraph beginning on July 11th, it talks about how we gathered, what our organizational structure was. Maybe we could mention, however briefly it needs to be, or in depth it needs to be mentioned, that we initially discussed the form of government, and we then came to the conclusion and were also reminded that this was not actually intended to be part of our work, and now we go right into the Town Meeting Act.
I think to your
But it-
point,
But the
Yeah,
transparency, I think, is real, and like you said, people who watch those meetings might be wondering, well, what happened with that, and what's going on behind the scenes that nobody's talking about that.
I'd be more amenable to that. I think that could be better.
Yeah, I like that suggestion.
Got it. Okay, good. Anything else as to the report? I will try, before our next meeting, hopefully sooner than the day before, to get an updated report to give you a chance to have looked at it.
Sally, I think one thing that, you definitely drew attention to the fact that we invited all these current and former officials to help us understand and get their views on things. On some of the issues, we heard from them their views, and I think it's worth including in, as part of our deliberations on this issue. We went back and forth on these different positions. We also heard from members of the public, or former selectmen, whoever, about them, just to include, I think it beefs up like the deliberations that happened when you acknowledge it wasn't just us at the table, we had other people coming in and providing their views as well. So in the discussion of the specific recommendations, to the extent that we did get those kind of inputs, I think it's worth noting.
Can you think of an example?
The reduction in town meeting membership. We heard from a number of folks that they thought the town meeting was too large. And I think that's going to be one of the more controversial subjects out of this recommendation, I think. And I do want to show that we had a lot of different views coming to us.
Well, and I think that can definitely be backed up by this current fact that we only have, 2 precincts that are,
Competitive.
yeah, and the rest are not full. So I think we, are doing pretty good on that one based on this current election.
Say again, I didn't catch what you were saying.
So basically, I think we're right on that, and I don't know that we're going to have to defend it too much, considering we only have, out of all our precincts, only 2 are full, and the rest are...
That's the current nomination papers?
Yeah. So we still don't have engaged people right now, so I think lowering it, I don't know how much pushback we're going to actually get, that we can't say, well, here we go, like, this current election, we're dealing with it again.
I think John's point is well taken as far as, at least in some way, in the report, that we had input from the outside of the committee. Personally, I don't think we need to highlight one issue over another issue, but just putting out there that we did have people who came in and shared their ideas. That would be my suggestion. I would keep it general, in other words.
But it's already in there in a general way.
Good,
Yeah.
perfect.
So I think what you maybe are suggesting is to make it specific to each topic, sort of
Yeah.
what views were presented and,
Yeah. To the extent that we had, back and forth on some of these issues, I think it's important, because if there's back and forth with us, there's going to be back and forth in the community. And I think it's important that whichever side you are on, okay, they heard both sides, or they heard three different versions of the issue. So I think it is important to have reflect the deliberations that happened.
I disagree. I think that the fact that it was posted, I think that we did everything possible to allow people to come. We recognized that people came. I think if people are going to want to dissect different issues that we discussed and say, well, who did you have come in here? I don't think we have a responsibility to say that. We're saying that we were open in every way that legally we're supposed to be open. We were on cable. We have a section in our agenda. And we've done that every single meeting. And I think that creates I think that's what we've done.
And the minutes, again, thanks to Ann Freitas for doing them for us, reflect pretty precisely, pretty specifically what different people had to say about issues that came up. So the minutes would be a source of that information too. I'm not inclined to identify people by name in the report, that this was a suggestion of so-and-so and this was a suggestion, because that could be divisive, or I would prefer to give the results after considering all these different points of view. This is what we came down to.
I'd like to agree with you on this. I just have a feeling that it's not going to go quite that well, in the sense of, like, people are going to have questions, even though we gave them all the information and and they're still going to say, why did you choose this?
But I think
And I
it's-
guess that's-
I think that's their responsibility to ask that question, and not our responsibility to defend every potential question.
Okay. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree. I do agree.
I was inclined to disagree with you, but then I've been sitting here thinking about if we had had a document that really listed in fairly great detail the discussion and the dissenting or supporting opinions that were all included in this process 10 years from now, and we were able to look back on that document, how valuable would that have been to us? And so I'm wondering I feel it would be useful to think about this, not just in the current process, but also sort of what we're leaving for posterity. I just think that's an interesting idea.
But they do have the minutes, I suppose, that they could just compile.
We could refer people, if they had a question. I just think spelling it out in too much detail, people are going to get lost in, or if they don't happen to like or agree with the person.
I'm not suggesting in any way that we name specific people. I think that's a negative idea on all fronts, but just to name the positions or the concerns that were raised, and this is why we chose not to follow that or why we chose to. To me, there's value in that, even though I think it changes the type of report that gets created, and it then makes it so lengthy that maybe that's going to deter some.
Right.
But I think I agree more with John the more I'm thinking about it.
The one that I definitely agree with you on is the town manager residential aspect. Like, I don't know that we spoke to anyone that wasn't just, like, we spoke to the MMA, we spoke to previous select board members, and almost no one thought that the residential requirement was good, but I know that a lot of citizens think that it is. So that one, I agree that, like, we debated about that a long time, but there was no one in like the professional field that thought that that was an appropriate thing. But again, we don't have to defend that. It is on tape. Not tape, I understand.
You know, I think going back to, we were selected for whatever reason to represent whoever we were representing, to fulfill the warrant article, which we've done, and this is our conclusion of what we think. I don't think that if people have questions, then they can ask those questions. If they don't like what's there, then they can not accept it.
I have a little more, I guess, after all the hours we've spent in this room and in the room at Town Hall, I feel like I have a little more invested than to just say, well, we'll just put it out there and let them do what they want. I would suggest that we ought to advocate a little bit in this, and part of the advocacy here, I think, is we got to this position, you may disagree with this particular position, you may not, but we considered all points of view. And I think it's worth including those points of view, because I think when someone sees, okay, I have that point of view, it was recognized, it's in this report, I think that person is more likely to continue reading it and to entertain the possibility of other sections that they maybe do agree with. So I think it is, like, I feel like if we just try to say, like, well, this is what we recommended, and we don't do more than that, and we say, well, they can ask us questions, we're selling ourselves short. And we're selling, like, our efforts short.
Do you mean to quote people, or
No,
just to
not
say,
at all, no.
we consulted with these
Like on,
these different?
yeah,
so-
well, you already included some of that. But what I'm saying is, like, on some of the bigger, maybe hot button topics, like you had just said, you know, we heard almost uniformly from former officials and current officials that this was their view. You know, like,
Yeah.
so I think, but no, not singling out individuals or like, but just sort of
Just
like,
the
these were the
different
these were the
types of
two different
people we-
positions or three different positions on this issues that we heard and debated and,
Uh-huh.
you know, and in some of the issues, like with the recall provisions, we didn't have unanimity in the committee. So I think that's fair to note. And I think it, again, some folks in the town will disagree with our recommendation on that, because clearly, some folks in the room disagree with our recommendation on that. And I think it's worth noting that, because I think it's I think you're more likely to convince someone if you acknowledge their position.
So there's probably a way to do it without it being so lengthy that people will just be like, oh, blah, 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 like, what
Yeah.
are they getting at? And then have it not be so short that we sell ourselves short,
Yeah.
right? So there's got to be like a happy medium of description, but not over description.
I just want to clarify something. My opinion is out of respect for all that we've done and all that we've heard, in our openness in allowing people to come and inviting people to come to express their opinion on all their issues. That's my perspective. I don't think we have to justify it to anybody, and I'm not being laissez-faire about the idea of just, now we're done, so that's it. It's out of respect for what we've done and the extent to which we've talked about things, and we've been willing to hear people come in at every meeting. So that's why I think that we've done our job and done one heck of a job on it, and I think that we need to put that out there. And if there are issues that pop up with individuals, if people are upset, I think that's the way the government works.
Well, one thing that's difficult is I'm trying to anticipate, because I'm trying to think how I'm going to translate these ideas to words, you know, is that most often, when people came to a meeting or sent an email to us, it wasn't dealing with just this act or just that act, or just this issue or that issue, but everything. So it's hard for me to suss out, well, okay, I can have a sentence or two about that in, for instance, the town manager residency piece. I can add it to the stuff about changing the size of town meeting. But it's harder to do that in the smaller issues like I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example
So maybe
here.
like they were saying, the real hot button issues, right? So residency, the recall, I don't know
It
what
doesn't have
else.
to be everything, and I don't think it has to be everything. I think we could even, it's probably just the residency requirement and the precinct size are the two big ones for me.
I think the recall, too.
And the recall, I
Yeah.
think that's.
Probably those three are
Yeah.
really the real major ones that we
Yeah.
did. Those may be the ones to elaborate on more and not worry about the small things that we are recommending.
Right, and I lean towards including some justification, just because at the end of the day, we need people to vote for this. And there are going to be very many people who read this report who are not going to come to the meetings, who are not going to get a chance to ask us questions. And so I do think we need to make our case, because this is,
Might be
none of this is,
the chance we get.
right, this might be the only chance we get. I agree, it doesn't need to be page after page, but it could just be a couple of lines on the residency requirement that, several, professional, yada, 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 representatives from the municipal, Mass Municipal Association, former select board members, et cetera, all endorsed the removal of the residency requirement, just that sort of thing. Because I think I think for two reasons. One, it does show that we considered a variety of viewpoints. And two, it provides some legitimacy to what we're doing, that it wasn't just, as wonderful as we all are, it wasn't just us sitting in a room coming up with ideas. We went to these experts and we took their feedback and we debated the pros and cons. I agree, people can obviously go back and watch the meetings if they want to, but I don't think including a couple of lines is, I'm not the one writing it, so if you let me know.
Especially on those three sort of.
Yeah, I don't think.
Topics.
I don't think it needs to be any more than those three. Those were the ones that seem to be the most contentious, even among us.
And with the, those three issues only, would, in addition to including the outside feedback, do we want to put how those three were voted, or we just want to put them as recommended? If we're talking about positions we got from the outside as well.
Would you prefer that it goes in so that, for instance, like with the recall, that you were not in favor of it? Is that what you sort of mean?
I'd be fine with that. I'm not sure what the committee would want. I also was the only no vote on producing the town meeting members, so I'll just slink over into the corner here. I stand by that one. I stand by all of my votes that are videoed and in the minutes. But I don't know. It was just, if we were thinking of including the pros and the cons of the outside, that's one thing to think about. I'm not sure what would be best there.
I mean, my view is that I think it's worth noting that where there isn't unanimity, there isn't unanimity. I don't think we have to name names, but to say that,
It was a 5-4
no, not
vote
even.
or whatever.
Not even.
Oh.
I think just that it wasn't a unanimous vote of the committee.
Okay.
But but if we lay out the positions, this is why we voted for it, and these were the views of the people who didn't agree with that. I think it's, again, with certain issues, like the bigger hot button issues,
And then if people wanted to know.
including that, I think is worthwhile.
And if people wanted to know who wasn't, how the vote went, they could always then look it up
dig
in the
through.
minutes, yeah.
One thing to consider too is in the structure of the report, and I'm not saying this is necessarily a good or bad idea, just throwing it out, but if we are in agreement, there are a few issues that are, perhaps most pressing or most important, are those sort of in an executive summary explained, sort of pulled apart. Because what I don't want to have happen is, people are reading the report and then one recommendation is a page and a half of explanation, then the other ones are short, and it could just seem a little bit inconsistent. But if we had a heading that was, whatever we want to call them, in terms of the major changes, and those 3 or 4, whatever they are, laid out right there in their own section, that might also help, because that sort of sends a signal, hey, these were the big thorny issues that we debated, here's what we talked about, everything else is not less important, but that it can give people sort of a quick glance to look at those important issues, just a thought in terms of structure.
Yeah, people would skim through, not skim, but I mean, they could go through fairly quickly the other ones and then know that when they got to the end and saw the pages of, these were where we spent most of our hours. Read every word, read every single word.
These are the really important sections. And because I'm just thinking too, just like it's just structure, just so it's easier to read, but also there, that way it's, as a reader, you're not saying, okay, well, why is there so much written about this decision, but not as much written about this decision? We could say that we, as a committee, we determined that these were the most important ones for the, in terms of civic engagement, et cetera.
I like that. Does that
thoughts.
sound reasonable to you?
Yeah,
Would that satisfy?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think, though, like, the where you started with an executive summary, would that be a place where it's just, these are the recommendations? Like the way these are laid out for the Town Meeting Act section, A through D, maybe a shorter version of that? Like as an
Well,
executive summary?
To me, an executive summary would be different than this report altogether. It would be like a prelude to it, or
Yeah.
the first page of it. It's in the body of the report that you give more of the detail. But perhaps there can be, like I tried to have an introductory paragraph about the different people who attended our meetings, and
Yeah.
to kind of broaden that out somehow and have it say, because not everybody who met with us had anything to do about whether or not incumbents should have to pull
Right.
nomination papers. In fact, I don't think anybody outside of this committee, I think I was the one that recommended it, to tell you the truth. I don't remember, I mean, I might be glorifying my role, but, I don't remember that somebody came to us and said, this is something you should do.
No.
We generated our own ideas, too, but they were consistent with input that we received about the need to try to have town meeting be a more active participation by town meeting members, and ways we tried to do that were to reduce the size, to remove that incumbency preference, if you will, and the other things that we did. So it's just hard for me to imagine that with each point, we'd have to have a couple sentences about, we heard from all these people who thought this and thought that, but this is what we
Yeah.
came to. Do you know what I mean? Not every one of the issues or points, to me, warrants it.
Maybe in the executive summary, we just mention the fact that these three key acts were highly deliberated, and explain that that's why there's so much material in those sections when you get there. The recall election, for example, was a citizen's petition that was passed on to us. So it's a brand new act. So, I mean, between that and what were the other two? The residency
Residency.
and the size of
Town meeting.
town meeting. They were significant deliberations, and you'll note that when you get to that section, there's substantial material to back our recommendation or support.
I'm not adverse to that. I'm just, to recognizing that those key issues, that there was some extra effort. I just would want to stay away from long verbiage that would explain each of those, et cetera. If we lump them together and say, no, we are noting that those are the key issues, and we're saying that we went the extra yard, and people came in, that's fine. I don't have an objection to that. Yeah.
And that the majority of the other acts are basically grammatical changes or changing pronouns and so
Yeah.
forth. Help people up front. That's the purpose of the executive summary. And I don't think we can write that executive summary until the whole draft is done anyway.
I agree.
You don't write it first, you write it last.
Right.
I feel like we just made a lot of confusing work for you, Sally.
I'll do my best with it, and we'll keep working on it together. We've got,
Yeah.
2 more meetings after this to hone it.
Okay.
So I think it's going to be, it'll be a really good process, I have no doubt.
I'm also happy, again, like, I'm a writer, but it's my day job, so if you want me to help with anything or run anything by, I'm happy to take some of that load off, so
Thank you.
that's what I do.
So, thanks, I really appreciate that. So do you want to turn to Town Meeting Act, or
Can we discuss John's email?
Yes, and also Fawn had sent a couple of ideas to me too, and of course I found one or two things too.
Oh, right.
So why don't we just switch to Town Meeting Act and see how far we get? I mean, yeah, Town Meeting Act. John, you want to talk about your,
Yeah, so I took another look with the thought of like looking for inconsistencies between the two or things that we need to reconcile, and I didn't really see much in the way in that regard. But yeah, so the email I sent kind of lays out the suggested changes I have. Section 6, the phrase representative town meetings, capitalizing town meetings. That one's pretty straightforward. And then in section 7, the discussion in the second sentence of section 7 just confused me. So I tried to get my head around what it was trying to say. This is the piece about when there's a vacancy, how vacancies are filled in town meeting, so basically how a caucus is called. So the way the second sentence currently starts, it says, upon notice by the town clerk to the town meeting members from the precinct, or upon petition therefore signed by not less than 10 town meetings members from the precinct, notice of any vacancy shall be promptly be given by the town clerk to the remaining town meeting members from the, that whole section just confused me.
I'll tell you what I think the answer is.
Yeah.
I think that if you had a precinct and you knew that you didn't have a full panel, and if the town clerk didn't do anything, 10 members of that precinct could force it. That's why I think it's either noticed by town clerk or petitioned by town meeting members from that precinct. That's why I think it's that way. The initial language in the act, as
Yeah.
I recall, talked about it being by petition, so we added the provision that allowed the town clerk to do it. Before, it used to only be by petition of town meeting members from the precinct. So we added an administrative level, if you will. But we didn't want to lose the ability for the town meeting members to petition if the town clerk didn't take action.
Okay. If that's the case, then the first upon notice by the town clerk seems redundant to the notice of vacancy that follows later in the sentence. Unless it should say, upon notice to the town clerk, wait.
I think the intent was to, again, either the town clerk would call attention to the fact that we didn't have enough candidates in a particular precinct, or the town meeting members from that precinct could do it either way. And by either method, I mean, maybe the
Yeah.
fact that the word notice appears that second time is what needs to come out. But the town clerk will give notice that there's going to be a special meeting prior to the next town meeting.
Do you see what I'm saying about that, the way it reads with having upon notice, like, it's like you saying, upon notice from the clerk, notice shall be promptly given by the town clerk to the town meeting members.
I think in that section, the key word is notice promptly given by the town clerk to the remaining town meeting members, that the 10 who didn't sign the petition also have to be told that there's a vacancy in their precinct in case they had been left out.
Okay. Upon notice by the town clerk to the town meeting members.
So either upon notice by the town clerk or upon petition, the town clerk will give notice to the other town meeting members from that precinct.
Okay, I see, yeah.
Or maybe you don't have to even have that they'll get notice, just that she'll call a special meeting, he or she.
Notice of to the remaining town members. Vacancies exist. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. It was hard to me to figure that out, so I'm sure it'll be hard for others to figure out. Let's see, upon notice by the clerk to the town meeting members from the precinct, petition thereof, signed by not less than 10.
Yeah, notice doesn't make sense
Oh,
in
sure.
both places.
Signed by not less than.
So maybe the second phrase that goes after the precinct, reference to petition signed by at least 10 members of the precinct, maybe that next phrase should just come out and just say, the town clerk shall call. A special meeting.
Yeah, I think that I get what you said as far as that, but I don't think it's needed. Yeah, I think that might be my preference, is to just take it out.
So what I'm proposing is that it would read this way. Upon notice by the town clerk to the town meeting members from the precinct, or upon petition therefore signed by not less than town meeting members from the precinct, the town clerk shall call a special meeting of such members for the purpose of filling any vacancy, said special meeting to be conducted immediately before said representative town meeting. And by the way, town is misspelled there. I caught that one before tonight.
I think that accomplishes the purpose and sounds clearer. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that'd be a positive change.
Yeah. So how about we just do it?
Okay. And then the other, section 15, I think it's just a correction on the quotation marks. Yeah, okay. And this is the piece where it has the language that should be put on a warrant article. So I think after 1973, we would need the single quotation mark.
Which is there.
Is it? Oh, I must have an earlier version.
Yes, so do I.
Okay. And then is the double quote at the end of,
Goes, the double quote that in the version we're looking at, by the way, is the one that was voted on December 4, 2024. It's in print at the very top of the very first page.
oh, okay, yeah, I'm,
I think we've already made this correction, but
Yeah,
I think the
11:21.
quotes go all the way to the end. If so.
okay,
we're-
so I'm looking at an earlier version, I think. So it does have the double quote after Danvers Town Meeting Act question mark?
Yes,
Okay. So we already made that correction?
yeah.
Okay. Do you want a motion on that section 7 change?
Plus the section 6 change, right?
Yeah. Do you want a motion for those?
Just get to the section 6 real quick.
Yeah.
And it does, again, the version we're looking at does say representative town meeting.
Okay, I apologize. I'm looking at an old version. Okay, so it's just the section 7 change then?
So, John, you want to make a motion on your change to section 7?
Yep. I would move to change section 7 to delete the phrase that Sally suggested.
Second.
And again, that phrase is from notice of any vacancy through he, she, they. So John made the motion, Nova seconded. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. So Nova had pointed out that in section 8, and let's see if it was in a prior version or not, it says 10 in the forenoon. I'm sorry, fun.
Okay.
I'm sorry. So this is on page 10 of the version we're looking at. It says the polls shall be open not later than 10 o'clock in the forenoon and shall be closed at 8 o'clock in the evening. And maybe what we should just do is, hey, have it be 10 a.m. and 8 p.m. How about that?
Forenoon. I might have to start using that.
And then the other change, we could probably vote on both at the same time, because it's a similar issue, I think. Has to do with section 12. My note, and I think this was from an email that you sent to me, Fawn, was that in section 12, it again refers to 10 o'clock in the morning. And again, why don't we just change it to 10 a.m. and 8 p.m.?
Okay.
Need a motion?
Yes.
I would like to move that we change language in sections 8 and 12 to say the polls will be open from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And I don't think I had anything else, but let me just check real quick. Did anybody else have anything in the town meeting act that, upon reflection, you think we should do anything more to? Okay. So we've had the discussion of some additional changes in the Town Manager Act. We've discussed the report. We've discussed John and Fawn's suggested changes to the Town Meeting Act. And one other thing. The, brought to my attention, what did I do with it? Here it is. Ann Freitas pointed this out to me. In our February 19th, 2025 minutes, we were talking about the Municipal Light Board. And this was just in our discussion. It wasn't a matter that we voted, I don't believe, in terms of a change, but it was about the function of the Municipal Light Board. And in our minutes, it is said that the Municipal Light Board advises the town manager and/or the DPW director on matters pertaining to the electric division. And in fact, it should read that in addition to advising the town manager and/or the DPW director, the Municipal Light Board also advises the electric utility director. And it used to be that the head of the DPW also covered the electric, and now that's been separate. So it was just really a correction to the discussion about the Municipal Light Board. It wasn't a matter of something we voted on. Now, this committee voted to approve these minutes on February 19, and they've already been submitted to the town's website, as some of our minutes are all categorized there. So I kind of thought about procedurally what to do, and I think it's enough to acknowledge in this meeting publicly that the Municipal Light Board has that additional entity to which it reports. I don't feel we need to amend the minutes, but I'm open to whatever anybody else thinks.
I mean, if we just add it to this meeting's minutes, I think I'd be,
That's how I felt as well. Okay, so why don't we just, I think we've said it out loud now. It wasn't something that we voted on, and we need to go back and change a vote. So I'm fine with just having it be noted verbally. Okay, so our next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, May 7, at the Town Hall. And then we have a meeting scheduled for May 14th back here. And, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, we don't have one, maybe I'm confused, the 30th of April?
We do not.
Okay.
Because remember, when we first set out, it was that we'd meet the 1st and 3rd.
Oh.
And there's been one other month so far that there's actually,
It's not every other one.
Right.
necessarily.
right. So, I mean, we could see if we could add it. I'm not sure how available a room would be, but I do think we're going to need a little bit of time to kind of generate and work on the report possibly. But my goal is for us to have completed our report for the 14th, so that I can pass it on to whoever it goes to next.
14.
So that gives us 2 meetings.
So
Those two meetings will be 7 days apart?
Yeah, those are back to back, 7 and
But-
14, right? Mhm.
The 7th and the 14th, they're 2 weeks apart. We don't have.
No, that's 1 week apart.
I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Yeah. I know that there was a reason, but I can't remember now what it was,
Mhm.
Just to get it done.
probably. So we don't have another meeting this month at the moment. If you'd like, I can inquire as to whether we can get one set up. There's time in terms of open meeting law to post it. I just don't know about where there might be available space,
Instead of 2 weeks in a row, I guess it could be.
maybe. And it might have had to do with availability of space.
Well, if we met the 5th time in April, then this May 7th would be back-to-back.
But we could do the 14th. It doesn't have to be the 1st and 3rd, does it?
I don't remember why
I think
these,
that's- What's going, the
Well,
election is the 6th, right?
Yeah, the election's the 6th, yeah. And town meeting's the 19th.
I'm going to be a town meeting member.
I know. Might be completely out of everything.
I'm available for however we want to do it, just for that. I don't know about anybody else.
7th and 14th is fine, because it'll give Sally a little bit more time to work on any report.
I just feel like there was a reason that we did it that way. And if we try to move it back, I think we'll slowly
Right.
uncover that it didn't work
Right, yeah,
again.
let's just keep it the way, yeah. Okay, 7 and 14.
so I'll continue working on the report, and please feel free to send email me with any thoughts you have. I'll try to get this next draft out to you several days before May 7th, so you could even go in and edit it by hand or by the redlining of your computer, whatever you think is going to be best. So, we're good.
Good.
So it is now 7:55.
I'll
Is there
make a
anything else that need to discuss, or, okay?
Motion to adjourn?
Second?